Working Cows Podcast, episode 144.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, powered by the Global Ag Network. And this episode is brought to you by Performance Beef. If you're looking for a way to better analyze and capture data in your feedlot enterprise, I would encourage you to check out Performance Livestock Analytics. Today on the show, we are going to talk with Bryan Moes of Moes Feedlot near Watertown, South Dakota, and we're going to talk to him about how Performance Beef has shaped his business, and then some of the other neat things that he has going on. They were up for a stewardship award in Region 7 of NCBA, which is a very large region covering a very large number of mama cows, and to see them up for that stewardship award in that context is a pretty big feather in their cap. But first, we're going to start off by talking to him about how Performance Beef has changed their business there at Moes Feedlot. So, Bryan, thanks for joining me on the Working Cows Podcast.
Thanks, Clay. Glad to be on here and chat with you.
So, I've been on the Young Farmers and Ranchers Committee with you for a couple of years now, I guess, and I personally have gotten a chance to see you check in on things at home while you're away traveling for YF&R, and see you use Performance Beef in that way to check in on it. So could you talk a little bit about some of the ways that Performance Beef has simplified your business?
Absolutely. We started out, we've always been really data driven on our farm. So all of our feed sheets with doing custom feeding for ourselves and other customers to keep our enterprises separate, we had a bunch of paper copies. So you had a through ring binder in the tractor, and with that through ring binder, you had your paper batch sheets that went from 100-pound increments to increase or decrease. And in 2017, we found Performance Beef, and we're really happy with what we saw. And the biggest thing that we were looking for at that time was just our feed sheets, because at the end of the month, that was a headache. We'd have to sit down with me, and my sister Amber does the books for us. So to get all the pounds entered in and any questions about my wonderful chicken scratch handwriting and try and follow those paper copies if they got wet, or that we really saw value in that part of just simplifying our data at the end of the month collection that we were doing anyhow. And this made it faster and easier, even at the feeding and the end of the month. I'm able to change my rations just by the push of a button to, okay, I want to go up 100 pounds on this pen and this pen, and these 3 pens are all on this batch, and so I add them together, get my new feed, write it on a piece of paper. And the big thing with that is if a guy writes on the piece of paper his target weight, if we weren't over 100 or 150 pounds, just depending on the feed ingredient, kind of the cost to it, it wasn't getting tracked. And with this Performance Beef, if you're over whatever your scale monitors, most of them are 10-pound increments, you're monitoring and tracking that. And we're now able to keep really good track of our shrink on our distillers, and keep track of, we can tell when it rained because our shrink is a lot lower on our distillers because we got some moisture added to it. We don't have a roof over our commodity shed yet. So we're able to track and watch all of our gains on the cattle, knowing what we fed, the pounds that were fed. If somebody else it's made it real simple. When they tell me, hey, I've been feeding a couple days and notice this pen isn't eating enough, how much should I drop them down by? I can go onto my program anywhere I have internet connection, update the pounds as fed, and just go in and save it. And seconds later, they can hit refresh on their screen and they can start feeding. And that's been absolutely wonderful for us, for being able to answer questions, and for anybody to be able to come feed, that once we get them trained, they're able to keep track of what they fed and go back and look how they loaded to learn from what they've done, instead of a guy just thinks he was close and at the end of the month, he didn't realize, hey, I used a lot of extra distillers because we use modified distillers, and being able to track that and keep our shrink in there so we're fair to ourselves and to our customers.
Sure. Yeah. Talk about being fair to yourself a little bit more. Touch on that as far as being able to track down to within 10 pounds what kind of weight is being added to the mixer wagon. I imagine over the course of the time that a given animal is on your property that could really add up.
Absolutely. Our cattle are usually here anywhere from 6 to 8 months, depending on when they come in, to about a year on average on about 2/3 of our cattle that come through our operation. And when you're talking daily on a pen of 300 head of cattle, you're off by 100 pounds every day. Maybe you're not over every time, but a guy sure don't want to be under every time. So we were always making sure they're getting at least those pounds. We weren't shorting those cattle, and they're cleaning their bunks up. And now we know what we've been doing before. Every morning, I'm able to go out and read bunks, and I can see on my feed program real quick on the bunk calls what has got fed. Did I have a little bit extra that I got out of the mixer wagon for this, or a little bit less? If 3 people currently that are trained to feed on our operation, we were doing haylage, chopping alfalfa hay, and I had no chance to really be watching feeding, but I knew it was getting done by having a third person there and having that program that they could go on, and they had to change some pounds on a couple pens. They were able to change it, and then after they changed it, they fed it right away. I didn't have to have any interaction with them. Where the old way, with the paper copies, it kind of gets hard, and with having it not to cheat ourselves with, a guy don't realize, but when you bring dry corn in, we roll all our corn here. There's some shrink when you roll it, and then there's some shrink when you feed it. If it's windy when you're loading, there's a 2 to 3% shrink easily a guy can get. And to be able to track, we know how many pounds came on the semi, and we know how many pounds were fed through our feed program. And to have that precise number down to 10 pounds of what was loaded and what was delivered, we can track what our shrinks are and know that we're fair to ourselves and we're getting paid for the corn if we supplied the corn, or if we purchased the corn, that we're billing out the right amount of corn from what we bought to what was fed. Because there is shrink on distillers. There's shrink. We have anywhere from 4 or 5% shrink on our modified distillers from local ethanol plant here, to up to 9 or 10%. It depends on the time of year, the sun, the wind, the heat. And we used to do this all by paper, and you talk about end of the month trying to go through and see what our shrink is to adjust our price appropriately. And it was a headache to do. A guy spent almost a day and a half trying to figure out bills, where now we spend half a day just to make sure our prices are updated, and our shrink is still on par with where we've been. So we have shrink figured into our prices. So all that is covered.
Yeah, and that's, it's an immediate feedback loop, right? I mean, you're not waiting till the end of the month to figure out, oh, we were off by 100 pounds every day this month. It was, it's immediately, you get the right amount loaded and you get the right amount fed, and there's that immediate feedback loop into the bookkeeping system that night or that week at the very least, I suppose.
Absolutely, Clay. With our distillers is a perfect example. Once or twice a week, we get a load, depending on our use, which is about 26 ton. And we add that 26 ton the day we start feeding that load. And we have separate bays. So we finish one load completely and clean our bay out, and then start the next load. And we track every single load of distillers where our shrink is. Our corn, we have 22,000 bushel bin, so we can't do that as close. So it's usually a month-long or 2-month process to track the shrink on that. But by being able to have that real time, as soon as I enter it in and as soon as end of day is hit for all my feed being delivered to cattle, I know I have this amount of shrink on that distillers that day. And that's worth its weight in gold to have that and have the pounds that were fed. And to go back to look at a certain group of cattle, we have pens that have 3 or 4 groups of cattle from either the same customer or different people, and we if they're on the same feed, we can put them in the same pen, same feed, same class of animal, and we can, at the day put in what was fed, we know right away 30% of that goes to this group, 40% of that feed fed goes to group B, and the rest goes to group C. It's already in the program, split out, so you can pull up anytime you want on the analytics to see what is my cost per day per pound of gain. And that's been invaluable to make sure we're on par with wherever all these other feeders are.
And what are some of the other benefits you've experienced from performance beef? And I guess what I'm thinking of here is more of the freeing you up to be even not just out in the field chopping silage, but away from the feedlot altogether. What are some of the other benefits you've experienced there?
Some of the big benefits are knowing, being accountable for when these people fed. If we got people coming in that they're getting here, they're getting them fed on time, they're getting them fed the right amount, so that I know my cattle are eating, and that peace of mind helps me know that my cattle are going to stay on track. And with them knowing, whether they knowingly or subconsciously do it, they're going to make sure it's on time because they know that I have the ability to look if they're off. One of the good features with this is if you do get off or you forget to push the button to change from loading distillers to loading corn, you do have the ability to edit that. But every day I get an email that says, okay, this is what was delivered and recorded as being fed. And at the bottom of that email, it has every single edit that they did and at what time they edited it. So if it's something during while they were loading, I've done it before. You get in the motion of it, or your fingers get dry and the buttons don't work on the tablet. That's my problem during the middle of winter. Wonderful technology. It's great when it works.
You are, I suppose there's a peace of mind aspect of that for you there. But also, I don't know how many people listening to the Working Cows podcast are familiar with the ins and outs of a feedlot, but it is, as I understand it, incredibly crucial to be consistent with those animals, feeding them at the same time every day and making sure that routine stays as close to the same every day as it can.
That's absolutely right. We treat our operation just like a dairy. My dad grew up on milk cows. Every morning and night, you had to be on time with that, and you had to be on time with that feed. If you weren't on time, you saw it in your production. Your rate of gains weren't there. We like to think of ourselves as kind of state-of-the-art and using the most latest and greatest technology and software that we can justify to use. And with that, this performance beef has helped us know that even myself to go back and look, well, geez, I haven't been getting out and feeding right away. I've been doing some other stuff first, checking calves. I mean, we have a cow-calf operation along with our feedlot, 9,990 head feedlot, and 300 cows we calve out here. And it just brings the guy back down saying, okay, I looked at my delivery times. I'm not happy with them. I need to get out, make sure I'm staying consistent on it.
How many head? You said 1,099 or 999?
Yep, we have a CAFO permit for 1,999 head. We also have 300 cow-calf pairs that we calve out every spring. About 60 to 70 of them are first heifers that we usually do starting in February to get them out of the way through our operation.
And I think you said that you were getting close to 4 pounds a day. Is that right?
Yes, we are getting about 4 pounds a day of gain on our feed cattle in that 600 pounds all the way up to that 1,200 pound range. We have an average of 3.8 to 4.2 pounds a day average daily gain on our cattle with an implant strategy on some. And we also had some just about yearlings come to our operation, and they did 4.2 pounds a day gain and went to an all natural beef program, and they dressed out and graded really well.
Yeah.
So we're pleased with what we're doing here, and this performance beef has helped us make sure we're staying on track and be able to measure these analytics on a day-to-day basis instead of a monthly basis.
You were saying that you got about 4 pounds a day on the feedlot, and right around 2,000 head. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a K-foal for 1,999 head. We also have 300 cows that we calve out, Black Angus, just commercial. And with that, we're able to get around that 4 pounds a day. We're anywhere from 3.8 to 4.2 on a lot of our groups. That is both on our implanted strategy cattle as well as some natural NHTC cattle. We're able to have the implant strategy, and we keep on top of that. And those cattle are zooming right along from that 500-600 pounds when we start pushing the feed to them, all the way to about that 1,200-1,300 pounds. And we usually finish about 14.5 to 1,500 pounds. With that, we also had last year some not quite yearlings when they came in from a local neighbor here, just some commercial cow calf, and they were able to get 4.2 pounds a day gain on those cattle coming in. They come in at 7.5 weights, and they went out as some big cattle in the NHTC on a specialty market, and they did good for him.
Do you think that is possible without performance beef, or has performance beef increased your ability to hit those kinds of numbers?
I would say performance beef has helped us to consistently on all our groups of cattle hit those numbers, where a guy can look at all the data and see what are my pounds of gain on these. We run everything across the scale a couple times on our implant strategy to be able to check for one of our custom customers. And the NHTC ones, they get about one vaccination is all, and then just being able to watch them, we can see. But we're able to track their daily intake, and we got a good eye to know how big cattle are with weighing them so often. So with that eye, we know they should be eating about 2.5% of their body weight. So we can go back and look on the dry matter intake. Are they up there or not? And if they aren't, why? What do we need to change? Do we need to change the mixing time? Go back and look at that. Do we need to look at the order we're putting ingredients in is something that's very critical too. Make sure the liquid gets in and gets mixed in, or we're putting silage in too soon or straw in too late, that it's getting too ground up or not ground up enough.
And another one of the things that you mentioned and kind of returned to it there and touched on it was the idea that you guys are very data driven. And I got, as I said, I have had the opportunity, you and I being friends and part of the same committee, I've had the opportunity to tour your operation. And one of the things that kind of really was interesting to me through that tour was basically you guys have a birth to finish direct feedback loop where you're able to see how these animals perform from the beginning of their life to the end of it.
Absolutely. The biggest part that we found is with all of our data, we're able to track where we are, keep track of everything. This birth to finish has really been something we've grown. We kind of started out with Dad had 30 cow calf pairs when I was just a wee little guy, and we built that up to 300 cow calf operation of some real good, what we consider genetics of commercial Black Angus that are pretty close. We could almost register them, I would think, with the AI records we have on them. But these cattle from birth to finish, it's like clockwork. We have, out of our 300 cows that calved out, we saved out 70 replacement heifers. We just got done breeding them here. We're getting close to 21 days. At 21 days, we're going to give a booster shot of some GnRH, and we're going to go through a week later after that, next week, and give them ultrasound test to see who's bred or not. With that, anybody who comes up open is going to get AI a second time. We'll do another cedar cycle, most likely. We've worked with SGSU in their breeding program, and that has helped us tremendously over the past 15, 16 years. We've just been blessed to use our data driven that we have the numbers of these cattle to the breeding, to the conception rates, to know we're keeping the good cattle that are going to stay. And that's really helped us the last about 3 years now. We've done the double AI cycle, and anybody who doesn't stick that ends up being a bull bred usually goes down the road, and we don't keep in our operation, even though they match that phenotype and that look that a guy wants. That's the biggest thing, is they got to get bred every year. And that's the first time. We keep them in that window, and like clockwork, February we start calving, and as of today's date, which is just the beginning of June, we only got 3 head left to calve. And really for the last 3 weeks, we've had 12 head to calve. They've just kind of been some bull-bred stragglers hanging on there, some older cows that we have kept around for the most part. But like clockwork, we got our first semi-load went out due to COVID, of course. It was a week later by the time we could get a kill date for them to get them into the butcher house. But we got them in. They still yielded good for us. Their yield grade was a little higher than we like, a lot of 5s. We usually try and keep it in the 3s and 4 range, but they were kept about 2 weeks longer than we usually do. And with that, it showed. We usually May is our main month to go with cattle, and we couldn't get any out till about the 2nd week and the 3rd week. But when we got them out, that first bunch, we got the big ones out, got them down the road, and the next 2 loads of 42 head that went out, they yielded really good for us. We had a lot of CABs. We were over 60, 70% CAB on those 2 loads. When they dressed at 63%. They're from phenomenal cattle with being able to track them and keep on top of them. And what stays in our yard comes up open of our heifers. We sell them as NHTC heifers. We put them back in if they're open after we bred them a second time. They're just perfect. They're a yearling. They fatten up quick in the feedlot, get them on 100 days, and they go down the road.
And you guys aren't afraid to try some little different crosses, right? You guys have had some good experiments through different crosses that you've used and had some good results there too, right?
Yeah, we actually work with, we bought about 5 years now. We've had half Jersey, half Gelbvieh cross cattle, and they've bred to a straight Angus bull. They have raised some heck of a calves. Well, they calve in February, and those calves, they bunk right up because we don't have the grass yet at that time, so the cows get dry lot fed. We got a nice big hoop barn that we put them in, and them calves will try and push the cows out of the bunk. Right now we got some 4 or 5 weight calves from February, and
wow,
they're pushing for bunk space right along with mama when we feed.
And they feed out good and grade good for you too?
Yes, absolutely. We've had some good luck with them. We also put those with our replacement heifers with that Jersey Gelbvieh cross. It gives a little extra milk for if the first calf heifer doesn't have a lot of milk. We try and give that calf every opportunity he has, and if that calf can steal a little milk off that Jersey, more power to them, and it doesn't seem to hurt us one bit on any of those calves. And it gives them heifers a little bit of a break where their first calf heifers still developing, coming due to be bred again their second time for their second calf. And it really has helped our conception rates.
Yeah, interesting. And you guys take in some cattle from a dairy too, and those are Angus bred as well, right? Some half Angus, half dairy. Yep. Or Holstein.
They're Wolf Angus Limousine cross bull, and they are out of a straight Holstein milk cow, and they're dairy beef. But if I brought you out to look at my feedlot, you would either think they're a Semitol or they're a straight Angus. 90% of them, there's no telltale white sign on any of them, or they all look like a polled cow. And those are ones I was talking about earlier with our implant strategy. We're able to keep them on feed and keep them growing. And like I said, having the technology to look, are they at their 2.5 pounds of daily intake of dry matter, or 2.5% of dry matter intake? That means the world to be able to track that real time, working with our nutritionists that are able to go in and look and monitor and say, hey, I noticed this when you were feeding, what's going on? And it's something that we get busy with everything. It's springtime, planting, first cutting alfalfa time. We get busy with stuff, and a guy gets distracted. It's nice to have them people on your team with access to it, no matter where they are, that they look at it and say, well, you're off here. What's going on? And it's like, yep, I got to reel that back in. Let's get that pendulum swinging back the other way and get it balanced out.
Could you talk a little bit, you talk a lot about AI, and you talk about moving lots of head through a chute. Could you talk a little bit about the facilities design there? First of all, from a stockmanship perspective of being able to work cattle efficiently, and then also talk a little bit about your facilities design from a capturing waste perspective and being able to get that waste out onto the fields and some of the benefits you've been experiencing there.
We have on our operation, one nice monoslope that we were finally in 2011 able to get a nice working facility. We worked a long time with just, corral panels with boards going to a single head gate with a gate, and you put a rod behind them. And I remember doing all that fun stuff, getting behind the calves, getting in the pen with them more than a guy would like to in a tight alley. We have so improved that now. We have a barn that is set up. We have a silencer chute. It was a heck of an investment when we bought it back in 2011, but man, that machine has paid for itself. A hydraulic chute really pays for itself. We have it set up where there's room for him to come in. We have gates that a guy can get around to safely catch them. We have gates everywhere. Some people might think we're crazy with the amount of gates we have, but I still would like to cut some holes in some of our fences and put more. It makes it easier to be able to move cattle where you need to, when you need to have options. And we're able to work calm cattle or fresh off the sale barn cattle. And you cattle guys will know what I'm talking about when I talk about sale barn cattle. When we got heavy duty gates that can get them in safely, calmly, we like to keep stuff calm. Really a lot of Temple Grandin influence and a lot of other great Kurt Pate had come out to our operation and looked, and he was happy with some of the things, gave us some tips, and we have our operation that runs into our monoslope facility. So we're enclosed, which really makes it easy on everybody year round. You're out of the sun. We got overhead doors we can open to get airflow enough in the summertime, trying to work when it's cool. But with having a tub and double alley going into a single alley into our silencer chute, that double alley is worth its weight in gold. If you can keep 2 or 3 cattle in there, you bring 2 or 3, 4 into the tub at a time. You might keep moving, but it's easier to just walk instead of to try and push 10, 20 of them in there. Just bring a few at a time, keep them flowing, keep them moving, keep them calm. We're able to work through. We're getting ready to ramp up. We castrate our calves in the spring. Anything that we don't keep for a bull, we keep 4 to 5 head bull calves out of our AI cows. And when we start running them through, we get it down like clockwork. It's anywhere from a minute to a minute and a half. We're getting them through our facility. About 4 people we usually have working. Someone to help hold the tail when we're castrating. One guy pushes up and castrates. Another guy runs a headlock, and one other person runs our scale head right now. It's the first time they get their data entered when they're about that 2 to 3 months old. Just depends on when they were born.
Wow, that's an impressive amount of data to have and being able to keep track of that. I do want to hear a little bit more about the facilities design, because I think the capturing the manure and the urine and some of that stuff that you're able to do through the monoslope facility that you have is part of the reason why you guys were up for a NCBA Sustainability Award in 2018. Am I right?
Correct. 2018, we won the NCBA's Environmental Stewardship Award for Region 7, which is North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas was our region. And we were honored to win that and have the opportunity to go on to national.
That's a lot of cows when you start to think about the number of mama cows represented by those 4 states. That's a lot of mama cows that you guys were up against.
There's a lot of them, yes. And the biggest thing when I was in high school working with Dad, the biggest thing we were looking at with our facilities is, okay, what was my goal? Did I want to come back to the farm? Did I want to go to college? And we decided, well, why don't I go to college? I really had a drive to become an engineer. It was kind of math and science was my passion, and the engineering just fit in. I love tearing stuff down. We might have a lawnmower or 2 sitting tore apart yet that didn't get put back together. But with that, well, it's hard to buy land. We're good at feeding cattle. We kept hearing reports, well, your Angus cattle are some of the best producing cattle. We like buying them from you every year in January after you backgrounded them and started them. We're like, well, why don't we capture some of that? Why don't we integrate some of that in? We have the ability to. Let's do it. So in 2007, we put up our first monoslope, and we were so happy with that. We put up another monoslope setup. We call it partial confinement. One big difference of ours is our north wall is only a foot, and that wall allows for airflow to the cattle. And with that, they stay cooler in the summer. They're shaded. And during the winter, we can close it up on three sides that it allows them protection from the snow and that high wind. But we can also crack it a little to keep fresh air through. If they're bigger cattle or smaller cattle, we close it completely because they don't need as much airflow, and it keeps that cold off of them. But with that, we're able to capture everything. It's 100% collected runoff from them cattle. There's nothing that goes in. We have 4 prairie potholes, or a lot of people call them sloughs. We live in a glacial lakes region, so we got a lot of low wetland areas, and we have 4 of them on just about each corner of our operation. And we take pride that we aren't polluting those, or any runoff from the feedlot goes to them. And that's one thing we always make sure when we're done hauling manure for the day, we've cleaned up any spills, whether it's half a scoop shovel full or more. It's cleaned up. Everything stays clean in the yard. We don't let anything get out where it can run off. And that's really been a passion. We love wildlife. We put in trees, and the trees have actually helped our feedlot during the wintertime. They keep that weather off so we can mitigate the weather coming in to our cattle. We do have some partial lots. And with just that environmental stewardship, that a guy has to do it to make it as good or better for the next generation. And that's what this is all about. This farm and ranching is the next generation.
When you talk about the next generation, when I had the opportunity to tour your facility, and I was sitting in a bus with your dad talking to him, and he talked about, because you're capturing the runoff from the feedlot and putting it back out on the field. He was talking about the amount of savings in chemical that you guys have been able to achieve. And I said, basically, that savings in chemical is a huge majority of Bryan's salary. Am I right? And he said, yeah, that's about right. That paid for bringing you back was the ability to capture that stuff and not have to buy in the outside fertilizer.
Absolutely. We have about 1,000 acres here close that we can put our manure back on. And let me tell you, when the guy can start raising his organic matter from 3% up to 5-6% in our fields, wow. You talk about that extra inch holding capacity per percent of organic matter. That makes a big difference when we get some drier years or a stretch between rains, which can happen. And
or even in a wetter year, you want to capture all of it. You don't want to let any of it go if you can. You want to keep all of it on that place you can.
Absolutely. So between getting organic matter up and, like you said, we save for what it costs us to haul out on fertilizer. It costs us less to have the same nutrient value out there than to have somebody else supply it. And that's a big cost savings with adding to the organic matter. And we also, all the rainwater, we have gray water runoff that goes into evaporation ponds. And on average, about every 2 or 3 years, we have to pump them out. Well, with the added moisture the last couple of years we've had to pump them out. We pumped them out last summer, which we were able to pump them into our alfalfa field to help us get a good third cutting. And that made a big difference when it was a little drier on that long stretch in the middle of summer. And this spring, we were able to put it out on some of our fields before we planted corn. And it costs to get that pumped out. There isn't a huge amount of value there, but we are getting some moisture value, and we're getting some fertilizer value out of it as well. That does pay for and saves us a little extra on fertilizer on application cost.
And I'm going to ask a question that I have no idea what the answer is, and mostly just to satisfy my own curiosity. Does what you feed that cow change the value of the nutrients coming out the back end? And do you guys pay attention to that and try to, on some level, feed for a better quality product that goes back on the field?
I guess as far as for the product that goes through them and back on the field, we haven't really started paying a lot of attention to that, but we do constantly take samples of our manure as we're hauling out throughout the year to make sure what our value is. And we know based on how many loads we've taken out, how much each load weighs, how much is on each field to track, along with before and after we apply manure. We are taking soil samples to see what's getting infiltrated. But as of right now, we haven't watched what we're feeding them as far as that, but we've actually started adding a lot of micronutrients to our cattle's feed, whether it be via liquid or some other specialized yeast cultures we put in into our feed. And we feel that's made a big difference in the gut health of these cattle. And if we got that gut healthy on these cattle, I think that helps our manure that's coming out, where we aren't having so many issues with running manure on these cattle. We're getting that good solid stool on 99% of every calf on our yard, big, small, or otherwise, whatever stage of life. And with managing, my dad will say it, he micromanages the heck out of everything, and there's a reason he does. And it's paid off, even though I hate it sometimes.
Yeah, very good. Well, today the show notes page for this episode is workingcows.net/144. If you want to head there, I'll have some links, especially to the video that was put together by the NCBA for the Stewardship Award. Really appreciate that. It was a very well done video and a well-deserved award for the Moes feedlot and the Moes family. Anything else, any big pieces that we left on the table? Anything else you wanted to make sure we covered today?
I guess the biggest thing is make sure I covered it, is we're really interested in this individual calf data to track anything that we've had to pull or treat extra, that it's simplified right away. It's live, just like load and feeding the cattle. And I know Performance Beef has been great to work with on that. We're looking at getting on their beta testing of that, and hopefully we can move forward with that. That would simplify my life with having it on the cloud-based instead of just an Excel sheet on my computer. Even though I love putting the formulas in, being able to have that live at my fingertips wherever I am. If I get a call from the packer saying, "Hey, we're bidding this for cattle, what do you got?" I could get right on the cloud on Performance Beef and look at it there with my projected rate of gains based on our historic data that we've taken. And data is just in a data silo unless you're got it processed, and that's the biggest thing, is having it usable data. And that's one thing that we've really been able to do. And the only other thing I'd say is, if you got questions, call and ask. That's the biggest thing. You call and ask, and they'll get back to you. And even your neighbors, that's where we've learned a lot of our stuff, the neighbors. And go to the people who are doing something you like or don't like and ask them, why do they do it that way? That's where we've got a lot of our improvements, and that's how we got the idea for our monoslope facility.
And what Bryan's talking about is, as far as individual calf data, is part of the new functionality that's coming to Performance Beef with the Zoetis acquisition, and they're bringing in the ability to track individual health data on individual animals through an RFID reader system. And so some pretty exciting stuff coming there.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say thanks, Clay. I've really enjoyed being able to talk with you and kind of share some of the things we've done on our operation. And I hope to help everybody else out there through these tough times. And farming's always been tough, and I absolutely love being able to have people come and walk through our operation. And that's where we've learned a lot of things. People go through, well, why do you do that? Well, when you become a teacher and you got to teach someone else why you do it, you better have a good why, or else they're going to question you. And that's really helped solidify some of our processes and really helped us change some things on our operations for the better.
Good. And I appreciate you, Bryan, and your willingness to always be a voice for agriculture, and you're doing a good job of sharing your story and doing it in a way that is very attractive and winsome. So good on you.
Well, thank you, sir. We try to do what we can.
Bryan, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, good stuff there. It was a really privilege to talk to Bryan. Bryan's a close friend, and really appreciate his insights and his perspective and what they've got going on there in Watertown, South Dakota. So looking forward next week to talking to Jim Garish. We're going to talk to him about how do you go about getting started in the way of introducing more and proper recovery into your business. So look forward to that for episode 145 of the Working Cows podcast, coming your way next week.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.